Welcome to Paradise Living Veggies. I'm Samantha Janes. What a productive week it was before the snow set in. I was able to complete a project I'd been thinking about for quite a while using recycled materials, and I'm really happy with the outcome. I also went by Papa's small engine repair, and my friend Chauncey talked to me about the difference between getting a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke engine ready for the springtime use. So that was really helpful because I've gotten confused about the two in the past. It's going to be a great show. Thanks for being here. It's a beautiful day on the farm. I have this beautiful old headboard that a friend gave me. It was actually a trundle bed for a youth, and I want to make something out of it for my flower bed. So I am going to experiment with what I have on hand, and we're going to see how this project goes.
I had been eyeing these old pallets for quite a while, and I figured I could put them to perfect use. After I had all my pallets near the garden, I set out to cutting them, which seemed like an easy task until my saw broke and then the weather came in pretty bad.
Well, I'm back at it. Got rained out the other day and I was super disappointed, and also my circular saw broke. So one of the great guys at the farm here, they cut the rest of my boards for me, so I've got all my supplies here. Went to the hardware store, I got some screws and I got some brackets because I figured out how I could do a couple of gates on either side, which is going to be really awesome. So I'm not a big person for plans. I like to just kind of see how projects end up shaping up. So I've got this board here already in place, and I'm just going to kind of go along and measure where I'm going to be screwing in these boards and where I need to tap in my posts. So pretty excited how this is going to turn out. Get that started.
The stakes I'm using were actually some piping that I bought last year and cut in half and used as tomato stakes. Pounding in the posts was easy enough. I used one per pallet, except for on the ends where I used two. My gate was super easy to attach. I had checked out some things at the hardware store and ended up deciding on brackets that would just easily make it swing without too much headache. I could have used a third hand when I was screwing these in, but nonetheless, it worked out just fine. Top bracket in place, now to place the lower bracket. Super, super happy I got that done. And look, my gate works. I love it. Ta-da! Another couple hours and my project was finished.
Hi, today I'm at Papa's. They do small engine repair and sales. Having the right equipment for the job is great if your equipment is running correctly. Today Chauncey is going to take us through some of the ins and outs of storing your equipment, and if you didn't store it correctly, how to deal with it in the spring.
Hello, Sam. Thanks for coming to Papa's and bringing some of your stuff. We're going to spend a little time today talking about what you should do when it's springtime and you bring your equipment out to start using it. So let's start off with a little basics about motors. So engines are either 2-stroke or 4-stroke when it comes to the power equipment working outside. So we're going to talk today about Sam's equipment that are both 2-stroke motors. Now, 2-stroke motors are pretty simple. They do not contain oil to cool them down. They have oil mixed in with your gas. So when you're pulling out equipment, depending on what you did at the end of your summer and fall, you want to make sure that you have fresh fuel in there. And that means for a lot of people, emptying out the old fuel and putting in new fuel. So if you hadn't also started your equipment, during the winter on occasion, that's a thing that we really recommend here. Or if you hadn't used fuel treatment, which you should be using, here's what you want to do. You want to start off, we've got Sam's Mantis tiller here. And you want to start off by emptying out your fuel. So simply take off the fuel cap, find a dish or something and go ahead and pour that old fuel out. That's only if you hadn't used fuel treatment, okay? And maybe that your fuel is still good in there. So because this doesn't have any oil, the next thing we want to do is inspect the air filter. So on this small garden rototiller, you just spin this off, and you're going to inspect. And you'll see with Sam's, this is a very dirty filter. And this is going to cut down on the ability of the engine to take in air to create combustion with the fuel. You want to go ahead and replace that. So the next thing you want to do is remove your spark plug to inspect your spark plug. You're going to need some tools for this. In this case, I'm using a 19 millimeter socket wrench. I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug off of this. Now, one thing is we can look at our spark plug and it'll give us an indication of the health of the engine. So because this spark plug is a little black, but not too black, this is telling me it's running a little rich. There's a little too much fuel in here, or the fuel's dirty, not burning as well. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this with a new spark plug. If you don't want to get a new spark plug, they're pretty cheap and you get them right here at Papa's. You can go ahead and clean this with a little alcohol and on a wire with a wire brush. So now that you've replaced your filter, you've checked your spark plug and cleaned your spark plug, and you've replaced your fuel with new fuel, now it's time to try to start it up. I'm going to go ahead and pull the choke on this. I'm going to pull the cord to start it. I'm going to press down on my fuel bulb, which is also something to inspect. So in this case, there's an indication that this carburetor most likely is not pulling fuel in. Now I need to do is check for spark. This is a pretty cheap tool to buy. It's a spark tester. I'm going to go ahead and take off the spark plug, plug this on, and check for spark. This is where it's handy to have an extra eye to check for the spark when you're pulling it. Oh, so that's good. We're getting it to pull some fuel. We're also indication that we have spark. I'm going to go ahead and now push in the choke. So in this case, it only wants to run if it's on choke. Again, that means that the air-fuel mixture through the carburetor is not pulling enough. So we have a carburetor issue here, and most likely we just need to replace the carburetor. These are all things that you can get from Papa's Lawn Repair Shop. But let's move on to the next piece of equipment. So here we are. We're going to start working on a different piece of equipment. This is a 2-stroke string trimmer, gas powered. The same thing applies that I was doing to the tiller. I'm going to go ahead and check the spark plug, check the filter, and I'm going to pour out the old fuel and put new fuel in, unless I put a fuel treatment stabilizer in it at the end of the last season. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this cover. Underneath, I'm going to look at this filter. This filter is also pretty dirty. You can see that's the white of the new filter, and that's what's in there. So we need to replace this. So now, I'm going to go ahead and take the spark plug cap off, and I'm going to pull out the spark plug. Again, I'm using a 19 millimeter socket, just loosening that, and then I can pull it out with my fingers. So here's the condition of this spark plug. As you can see, it's also a little black, indicating a slightly rich mixture, or the carburetor isn't working super well. We're going to go ahead and replace this, or we can clean it and use the same one using a wire brush and some alcohol. This is a really affordable tool, this spark tester, and I'm going to use this in the same way that I did before on the tiller. I'm going to go ahead and plug this onto the spark plug, into the cap, and I'm going to try to start it up and see if I have spark. Make sure that you have it in the on position with your switch, because you won't get any spark unless you have it in the on position. Now I'm done with all those different steps. I'm going to go ahead and press in my bowl about 10 times just so I get a good flow of gas going through the carburetor. And then I'm going to turn my choke on. Now, what is choke? Many people don't really understand what choke is. I didn't understand it until very recently. I think like a year ago. The choke cuts off some air so that the vacuum, the suction of the engine, pulls more fuel through because there's less air, so it wants to pull more fuel. So I'll turn that on, and you just want to do this just so it starts to start, and then you turn your choke off. You don't want to leave your choke on. That's the bad thing. So then you turn off your choke. Let it warm up, though. The important thing is to let your two-stroke engine warm up. Don't lay down on your throttle for at least a minute. So this weed whacker is operating very smoothly. The engine sounds consistent. This is a good weed eater, string trimmer, and you're not going to need to put any more work into it. So next, we're going to move on to our first four-stroke engine, which is on this lawnmower here. Now, lawnmower is a little bit more complicated because you have more moving parts. The engine's right here, and underneath, we have our blade. So the most important thing with a four-stroke engine and the difference between a two-stroke engine, like on this lawnmower as a four-stroke, is it has oil that lubricates the inside of the engine. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pull and check that the oil is at the right height on my measuring stick, and I'm going to see how dirty it is. Here's the fuel cap, here's the oil cap. I'm going to go ahead and wipe this oil cap clean. I can already tell, look at that. If I just use my finger, that's very clear oil. This oil is in good condition. And here, I've got my add and fill line with these etch marks. And in this case, I'm not going to screw this cap in, I'm just going to press it in. And here, I'm right to the top line. As you can see, this little hole right there, I'm just below it. That's good. When you're doing this, when you're taking this measurement, one of the big mistakes people make is that they measure their oil on a hill or incline of some kind. You have to be on a flat surface. I'm talking concrete or a floor. Move your mower to a location. Don't do this on your lawn. Move it to a flat location. And if my oil is dirty, then I need to go ahead and replace it. Or has particles in it. But check the condition with your finger. And you can see on this rag that's white, I have a nice, really light film. It's not black or dark. We also have all of our cables that are actuated by these levers here. All of this has to work together to make the engine work well and move forward and cut grass. This is a lot more complex than just your simple two-stroke engine. But let's do the same thing that we did before. Let's check for spark. Let's check the air filter. Now let's go ahead and empty out that old gas and make sure we have new gas. And let's put in gas stabilizer at the end of the last season. So here I'm opening up the air filter cover. And as you can see, this is a brand new filter. This is what it should look like at the beginning of the season. You should have a new filter in there. I'm going to go ahead and put this back. Now, with something like a lawnmower, it's a little bit more difficult to empty out the gas. And again, you use good gas, have a stabilizer, you don't have to do this step. But if it's been sitting for a while, after 2 or 3 months, your gas goes bad. It's time to replace it. So in this case, underneath the fuel tank, you can see there's a fuel line. What I can do is remove that fuel line and have a dish with a funnel nearby. With that old fuel, you can just put it in your car engine, your fuel tank on your car. It's no problem. It'll dilute in the gas that you have in there. It's no problem. All right, so now in this case, considering everything else is in really good condition on this, I'm going to go ahead and just assume you can check the spark plug on your own and replace it if it needs to be replaced or clean it. Now let's go ahead and try to fire this puppy up. In this case, there's also a fuel bulb. I'm going to go ahead and press that about 5 or 6 times. engines have an automatic choke. Newer engines don't need you to press a lever or pull anything or even press a bolt. It'll automatically do that on its own. I'm going to go ahead and press down the brake bar that stops the engine. This will allow me to start the engine. Alright, so my engine's running good. I've got the new fuel in there. I've already checked my spark plug and I've got a good filter. Now let's go ahead and inspect the blade underneath the motor. Now, whenever you're looking at the blade under the motor, it's important for you to take off the spark plug. To undo the spark plug cap. That'll make sure that there's no firing of the engine when you're working on the blades. Now, when I lift this up, I always want to have the carburetor side up. That way fuel doesn't go all over the place. So if you don't know where the carburetor is, just look where your air filter is, and that's the side that's on. So in this case, I'm going to lift up from here. Now what I'm looking for is I want a nice edge on it, and I want the blade in the right position. The edge should always be down, and if there's a flap on the back of the blade, that should be pointed up. So here I've got a nice blade. This looks like a new blade. And I'm also going to check for how straight it is. So in this case, I put my finger right here. I spin my blade around and make sure the other side is at that same spot, or close enough. And this is close enough. I'm also going to go ahead and clean out underneath the deck with a scraper. This deck is actually in pretty good condition. You can go ahead and get a scraper under there. So go ahead and use a good scraper to scrape underneath your deck. This one I got from Henry's Hardware. And I'll go ahead and just scrape off all of that old crap. So as you can see here, there's a lot more equipment that we can work on. And if you're intimidated by any of this process, feel free to ask questions or even bring it in for service. We're here to help you. And we work on all kinds of equipment, riding mowers included, and larger equipment.
Well, thanks Chauncey. Thanks for letting us come out.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching Paradise Love and Veggies. I'm Samantha James. We'll see you next time.